Star Wars, best place for below average Star Wars.
Hello there, and welcome to the Star Wars Show, a UK-based Star Wars podcast with in-depth discussions and analysis, always sprinkled with a little bit of silliness. This is our very special episode for Star Wars Podcast Day. It is Star Wars Podcast Day 2025, or it was on February the 7th. Obviously, this has been recorded a few days later on the weekend of February 7th. You might think, why February 7th? Well, that was the day Jedi Talk, the very first Star Wars podcast, premiered way back in 1999. I am the Geordie Jedi Pete, and I am joined by the brilliant Chris. Chris, how are you?
I am absolutely fantastic, Pete. It's wonderful to be back here again. Thank you for having me.
Well, you are very, very welcome. Great to have you back. Obviously, stepping in for the injured Ian and Jason today. Obviously, we wish them best of luck getting back to full fitness and hopefully be back on next week. Chris, when I say Star Wars Podcast Day, and when I say that the first ever Star Wars podcast was in 1999, to me, I just think, was there even such thing as internet in 1999? Obviously there was, I know that, but I just think as someone who's, 1999, I was 10 or 11, the internet just seemed alien, but there was a Star Wars podcast in 1999, obviously probably in the build-up to The Phantom Menace, I imagine, but what's your thoughts when I say the first one was in 1999?
I mean, it's crazy, isn't it, to think about it? Like, 99, there was already a Star Wars podcast out. I don't even think I even learned the word podcast until about, 2006, I think. So, to think there's already that, but, I mean, Star Wars, Star Wars fans are, I'd put them up there, I'd say they're probably the most passionate fans out there. Fight me on that one if you want to, but I'd say that that's probably the case. So if there's anybody who's going to be the first to do anything, to take hold of a new medium, to somehow inject Star Wars into it, it's going to be Star Wars fans that are going to be at the forefront of using that. So it doesn't surprise me that they were the first, but what does surprise me is that it was 1999. I mean, I'd be very interested to listen to some of those episodes and see kind of what were they like? Because podcasts now, I think people have got a pretty good format down. Even people who aren't podcasters themselves, they can kind of, they can think, oh, well, if I did a podcast, I'd do it this way. Whereas I remember listening back to some early wrestling stuff on the internet, and it was pretty much just a radio show on the internet. They're even trying to take call-ins and things like that. So I'd be interested to see the kind of format it took. But man, what an achievement that is to have the first podcast in 1999.
It is crazy. And I think, obviously I have a podcast now, we're talking on it. Again, you mentioned wrestling. I'm a big wrestling fan. I think the internet was using its intimacy, I think, by nerds who were nerding out about cool things like Star Wars and, wrestling fans. Tony Khan, obviously the owner of AEW, often talks about his early days in the 90s on the internet and the message boards. Now, me as just sort of a normal kid growing up, I don't remember sort of message boards up till, again, 2004, 2005, and then when I was about 15, 16, and then again, a podcast. I don't think I listened to my first podcast till about maybe 2008, 2009, and, maybe a bit later than that. So the fact that there was something happening in 1999 is just wild, really, in a great way. Maybe Google Jedi Talk and see if those episodes are still up, Chris. They might still be there.
Yeah.
You might know yourself if they're still going. Obviously, when you think about podcasting in 1999, obviously you have your own podcast, Chris, which I'm going to ask you about. Mm-hmm. When you think about when you started that and why you started it, did you ever think that oh wow, this has been around for 25 years before you started doing it?
I guess I didn't really think of it like that when I started up my podcast. It was more like something that my friend and I had joked around for quite a while, and then we were like, you know what, let's just do it. Let's just do it. And we were probably 19 years too late to be riding the wave of getting really big on podcasts. It seems like everybody has a podcast, but in the same way that I think that's beautiful and wonderful. The fact that technology is at the point now where if you've got something you want to talk about, something you're passionate about, you can start up your own podcast. I mean, even a lot of people do their own solo podcasts. The old Joey Styles way of a one-man commentary booth. I don't know if I could do that. I like to bounce off somebody else, but there's all sorts of things out there. And you've got round tables, you've got 2-man podcast, 3-man, 4-man, all sorts of things. And I think now everybody is very aware of the podcast format, and it's almost become a cliche. Somebody gets famous and then the next day they've got a podcast. But the flip side of that is that there's a flavor of ice cream out there for everybody. And whereas it used to be, you mentioned message boards before, you used to have to live on message boards to kind of get your fill of something that people would tell you was very niche, Star Wars or wrestling or whatever it was that you're into. But now, you can put your headphones in and you can listen to people who might not be your friends but feel like it, talk about a subject passionately that you care about, and you can fill your day with the things that interest you. And I think that is just absolutely beautiful.
It is. I think, with Star Wars, it's been going for, I think, over 5 years now.
Wow, congrats.
Sometimes it feels like forever, sometimes it feels like not long at all. But again, I think it's something that, if you put the time and effort into something and you really like something, you can create this type of content and put it out there in the world, which is a pretty cool thing, I think, without having to have any sort of, huge industry backing or industry knowledge. I would go and say that as well. It's quite cool. Is there any Star Wars podcasts you listen to, or are you more into the wrestling podcasts?
I'm definitely more into wrestling podcasts. I watch quite a lot of Star Wars on YouTube, Star Wars stuff. I have listened to Star Wars podcast. Obviously, Star Wars is the finest Star Wars podcast out there. Obviously, I have to say that. But
contractually obligated to get that in there.
Contractually obligated by the gun against my head right now to say that. But the one that I absolutely love, and if anyone ever wants to talk to me about podcasts in general, one which I will always recommend is Star Wars in Character, which I don't know if you've ever listened to it all, Peter.
I haven't actually, so I'm very interested to hear about this.
Oh, man, I love it. And they've been going for forever and a day as well. So sometimes it'll be a bit difficult because they can't fit all of their episodes in a podcast loop. But loop, that's not what I'm looking for, the word, podcast list. So sometimes it could be difficult to track down all of the episodes or work out which ones you've seen and which ones you haven't. But anyway, Star Wars in Character, essentially, it's, I think, 4 guys who they're very clearly sitting around a table drinking beer, and each time one of them will take the chance to tell the expanded universe story of character X. And they tend not to choose like Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, something like that. It'll be like Bib Fortuna or the spider monks that live in Jabba's palace or something like that. And the guys are huge Star Wars fans and also fully aware of how ridiculous some of the EU can get, both pre and post Disney, but especially some of the pre-EU stuff just is absolutely wild. And hearing these guys sitting around who are clearly best friends, and you feel like that like fifth member that's just sat there on the table. And I have been howling at that podcast before. It is one of the funniest things, hands down, I've ever listened to. And they also do, they've got other standard things like a trivia section and various things, and they're all competing with each other to try and get the most ridiculous Star Wars trivia right, and they do it, and it's brilliant. But I can't recommend that anymore. Star Wars in Character. That's my choice of one of my top podcasts, not just top Star Wars podcasts.
I'll have to keep an eye out for that. And listeners, if that sounds like something you want to check out, check it out. One of the ones I enjoy certainly on YouTube is Star Wars Explained. Alex and Molly on there. Deep dive some news, but they talk a lot about sort of canon events and what's going on in comics, TV shows, books, upcoming things. Lots of Easter eggs and trailers or in shows. Mm-hmm. They break down quite a lot of like factual stuff, which is really, really awesome. And when it comes to Star Wars sort of discussions, I just love Sky Talkers, Charlotte and Caitlin.
Yeah.
So they're an audio podcast, and I think that some of their stuff, just from their episode reviews to they do summer specials where they've talked about sort of George Lucas in his hometown. They've talked about, deep delve into some I think their newest episode, for example, is about sort of the deleted scenes of Revenge of the Sith and sort of how they're important and how getting deleted scenes back in the day was like a big thing and how it sort of died off. But yeah, definitely check out Sky Talkers with Charlotte and Caitlin.
Yeah, I will do. I mean, if you talk about YouTube, you're right. Sometimes I will just go on a YouTube spiral of just watching more and more and more niche videos about Star Wars until I'm sort of getting into what rivets were used on the Death Star. I love Stupendous Wave, really, really interesting videos. Generation Tech as well, Star Wars Theory. He's a massive hitter out there. But I like a different variety. I don't tend to listen to just one of them. I'll just kind of pick around and see what the topics are.
Speaking of, obviously, we've talked about a lot of different types of episodes there. Obviously, me and Jason sort of did do our deep dive review on Star Wars Skeleton Crew, which just finished up there in January. Chris, obviously, I haven't had a chance to speak to you yet, but sort of just, I suppose, talk us through your thoughts of Star Wars Skeleton Crew from how you were feeling going into it to sort of what the actual experience was like watching it.
Okay, so with Star Wars Skeleton Crew, my expectations were pretty low, if I'm completely honest. I vaguely heard about the concept, and I was like, that's probably not top of my list. It was buried in amongst your announcements of your Mandalorians and your Obi-Wan Kenobi shows and various other things, and and obviously I was on quite regularly when we were. When the Acolyte was being released, and I don't think it'll come as any surprise to you, Peter, that I really tailed off on that. I started off quite interested, started going down, had a little blip in the middle, and then I just fell off a cliff at the end with it. So I didn't hate it, but it wasn't setting my world on a fire. So the fact that the next thing out was, quote unquote, as people had said to me, 4 kids, which isn't totally true. Number 2, it was coming after something that I wasn't thrilled with. And number 3, I just wasn't generally excited for the release. My expectations were somewhat at the bottom of the barrel. But I should learn my lesson, because the last time that happened was the Han Solo movie. And I absolutely loved that. And that was the case with Skeleton Crew. I loved just about every second of it. It was exactly what my soul needed. It was like a hard reset for everything. The fun from Star Wars was there, the adventure, the swashbuckling. Obviously, it leaned heavily on some of the 80s sort of themes of, your Goonies, and it had the pirate themes as well. I thought it was just a joy to watch from week to week. I was, for the first time maybe since Ahsoka, I was waiting for the next episode each week. I was really, really kind of like, if this had been, the days when we were growing up, Peter, I would have circled it in red in my TV guide. I was really, really looking forward to it. I thought all of the characterization was wonderful. I fell in love with all of the characters. The only criticism that I would have of the entire thing was I thought that, spoilers here for anybody who's not seen it, I didn't think it quite stuck the landing in the last episode. I felt that the ending was a little bit abrupt, but I feel that's because they were leaving room for season 2, which I can completely respect. And I certainly hope that there is a season 2 of it, but it's a very minor gripe. It's just that I just felt like there wasn't a sort of big climax at the end. It just sort of, they defeated the bad guys and then, no, that was it. But you've still got, Jude Law's character, he's unresolved. He's not dead, so he's there. And I think that probably we'll see him again. And I certainly hope it's going to be in a season 2 of this. And maybe he will almost get a bit of a redemption arc.
Do you think Jod Nonarwood, who is of course Jude Law's character from Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Obviously, we've just seen him sort of looking up to the sky at the end of the movie, or end of the series, I should say. Sorry. Do you think he's going to be arrested by the New Republic, like after those moments, or do you think he's going to escape at on a ship?
I think it seemed pretty clear that he was kind of stuck on that planet, wasn't he? I think it's likely that season 2 would start off with him in custody for some reason, and then for whatever reason, another party needs him out, and he's broken out of New Republic jail. That would be my kind of speculation about how a season 2 might start for his character. But yeah, I think he was probably in that moment. He's looking up, and he's kind of almost like smiling and like, oh, right, that's it. I'm finally caught. That's it. I'm done. And he almost seemed happy in that moment of sort of, I don't have to run anymore. This is it. I'm caught, and I'm okay being caught by the New Republic, because you know what? They aren't going to do anything to me that those pirates would have done to me. So bring on 3 square meals a day.
At the taxpayer's expense. Not
exactly.
Money.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned there about a possible redemption arc. When watching it, obviously, I feel there was moments where, especially in the first few episodes, where you felt Jod was sort of being friendly to the children, and not just being friendly, but also seemed to have maybe their care and their best interests at heart. And then there's a moment, probably about 2/3 of the way through, where that changes, where he starts to grow. He sort of resents their childlike behaviour and resents the fact he hasn't got his own crew to help him sort of take control of the situation. And you could say it builds even worse than that when you look at how he threatens them. He has the lightsaber, and he threatens them that I'll kill your parents here, and I'll kill you guys if you don't play ball. I felt that was maybe a point where he was obviously stressed, and I think that's why he acted that way. But that was also where I'm a big Jude Law fan. That was where it broke my heart a little bit to see Jude Law go in a good way, because I was sort of cheering him on. It's like, yes, he's going to join the kids, and then they're going to go on the adventure. And yeah, there'll be moments where they're at each other's throats a bit, but it'll come back round and they'll all win together. Where obviously ends up, Jude Law takes the character the other way, which broke my heart a bit. So I don't know what your thoughts were on how Jude played that, and also how they did that in the show, where instead of having sort of the antagonist grown towards the children, it was like the opposite.
I was very impressed by Jude Law's performance in it. He was excellent, and he was, I suppose, in my ignorance, when it was like, oh, it's a kid's show and Jude Law's starring it, I was like, right, okay. It's not that I don't like Jude Law. It's just that I don't think I've seen him in anything since Road to Perdition. So it wasn't like, for me, a huge name. But obviously I know who he is, and I thought he did a fantastic job, and he did a wonderful attempt, a successful attempt at straddling that line where, we know that it was him under the helmet in the first few scenes. It's obvious to anybody watching. But then he does a really good job, as you say, of kind of showing a side of, maybe he does care about these kids, and, hey, let me give you a little bit of friendly advice, and I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to help you out of this situation. I am legitimately going to save you in this situation. But when you get into those back end episodes, it was all just a grift for him. And I think part of him, he probably did care about the kids. But on the other side, he cares about money a lot more. And that's what happened. And, he explained himself in that last episode. I mean, he got a bit of a raw deal of it. He got a little bit of Jedi training, and then his master got killed in front of him, and then he had to grift his way through the galaxy, basically. And he's almost forgotten what being kind is. He's just purely out for his own motivations. And I think, you point out that scene about halfway through where he's threatening them. That was the point of no return for him as a character. And I'm so glad that they put that in, because we needed a full-on heel turn from him if they were going to go down this route. It couldn't have been just a little bit of like, he snarled at them or something, or, he just kind of, gave a very sort of PG kind of veiled threat at them. He literally got a lightsaber out and was holding it at their throats and saying, if you don't play ball, I'm going to slice you up. And not only am I going to slice you up, I'm going to slice up everybody that you love. And man, that's the type of thing that I wouldn't have expected out of this show. And I think that's why it worked so well. And I hate using this phrase because we know what it's associated with, but subverting expectations. It really did subvert the expectations that I had for this show. I did not expect a scene of that magnitude, of that sort of level of violence against children. And I think it was all really held together by Jude Law's performance. And you can see why they went out and got a heavy hitter, and they didn't just get out, a new face, because they knew that they needed somebody who could carry that emotional weight and also make you hate him. And Jude Law did a fantastic job.
He certainly did. I think another key moment for me was when he obviously kills Brutus in cold blood with a blaster, taking away the children's what's the word? Obviously, they have a bit of I've forgotten the word. The children have a bit of leverage when they've got Brutus in the claw. Mm-hmm. Remember, he just walks and just kills Brutus at point blank range. Again, just showed that sort of not cold heartedness, but just that again, he's sort of a simple man. Like nothing's going to get in his way of being with his gold. Almost very reminiscent of Smaug from The Hobbit.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, he was. He didn't care about anybody or anything except his own ends, and what an awful way to live your life. But what a fantastic performance! And also, I think while we're talking about fantastic performances, Nick Frost, absolutely brilliant. It took me a couple of episodes to click on as to who it was behind that pirate voice on the robot. But man, he did such a good job at playing that sort of Hook-esque pirate. Absolutely fantastic. And recently my son's been getting into pirates, and I've had to do a lot of pirate voices, and it may be very heavily based off Nick Frost's pirate voice.
And his droid was, of course, called SM-33, which, if you reverse those threes, is Smee, who is, of course, as you mentioned there, Captain Hook, Hook's right-hand man.
Oh, nice.
There's so many Easter eggs, pirate Easter eggs. I thought there was a lot of... there was definitely a lot of Pirates of the Caribbean vibes going on in this, Goonies vibes. I thought there was some... I mean, not so much pirates, but again, like Scrooge McDuck, the way he sort of wanted the money.
Yeah.
I think it was Long John Silver aspects to Jude Law's character as well. When you look at Pirate Legend, a lot going on.
It had that fun element of it, where if you look back at the A New Hope, and you've got the scenes of them in the Falcon, and they're escaping from the Death Star, and Han's piloting around, and Luke's shooting the turrets, and they've got this kind of banter back and forth, and the music's very sort of it's swashbuckling, it's not intimidating, it's not really giving you the magnitude of a situation that they're up against this empire and being shot at. It's like, oh, this is almost a bit of fun, isn't it? But it's not quite to that degree, but you know where I'm getting at. And you've got these one-liners going back and forth, don't get cocky, kid, and all of this stuff. And that's the fun element that I think sometimes gets a little bit lost from Star Wars. Because, ultimately it is a swashbuckling kids film, as much as I as an adult enjoy it. And I do enjoy the heavy stuff. And I've just talked about how I loved some of those heavy themes that were in this. But the fun swashbuckling in this, man, it made my soul smile.
Definitely, and some of that swashbuckling feeling is very sort of Alexander Dumas-esque. You look at the Musketeers, the way they act and interact with each other. They're in sometimes very perilous situations, but the humour's there. And they take you through a fun adventure where the stakes are high, but you'll feel the deepness of certain parts of it, but you'll also laugh and enjoy it as you go along. So did you realise that the Skeleton Crew takes place in the same time frame as The Mandalorian? So it's technically a Mandoverse series, I imagine?
I was wondering about this because it was... I mean, obviously, at the end, we understand that it's the New Republic, but at the beginning, we don't really have a frame of reference, which is quite unusual for a Star Wars picture, because normally you've either got a crawl at the beginning explicitly telling you when something's taking place, or there's some events right at the beginning that, really kind of make it obvious to us about where this is taking place. If Darth Vader turns up, all right, okay, we know this is in the era of the Galactic Empire type of thing. But it wasn't really until the latter half we started getting more talk of the New Republic, because originally it's just the Republic that they're talking about, because on Atatin they've got no idea that there is a New Republic, that the Old Republic fell, the Galactic Empire rose, that fell, and now there's a New Republic. So obviously, I realized that it was in the New Republic era, but I didn't realize that it was technically within the Mandoverse.
Yeah, so it's the same time frame as the Mandalorian. We see Vane, one of the pirates, is also one of the pirates from the Mandalorian as well, season 3.
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, he is.
And I wouldn't, and now this planet's been exposed. Obviously, its defenses have gone right, so everyone knows about it. I wouldn't have to see, will this planet be a target of maybe Grand Admiral Thrawn, who's also just returned to the galaxy? All those credits. The First Order needs financing, right? So is this where the First Order gets some of its financing down the line?
Yeah, and Palpatine, obviously, he's got to pay those debts that he's got for all of those starships buried under rocks.
It all comes from somewhere, and there was obviously a containment plan put in place where, because you remember, sort of the supervisor says, the last message on the Republic was that the Jedi were traitors. So I feel that would have come from Palpatine or Palpatine's people, but still keep making your credits, because we'll need them later. And obviously, neither one come until now, but I think that's very much part of it. So I think we will. I don't know if we'll get a season 2 or not, but I think we will get it will tie into future storylines, and I think the treasure of Atatin and what Atatin can do is definitely going to tie into what the First Order needs going forward, I believe, anyway. That's my good feeling.
I think that's a pretty good guess right there, because like you say, this money's got to come from somewhere, and there's been a few things around that they've kind of hinted at as to where money's come from, corrupt politicians and things like that. But the scale that one would need, the money that one would need to turn another planet into a Death Star, basically, is off the scale.
It certainly is. You got any last thoughts about Skeleton Crew before we move on?
I think my last thought really is that I hope we do see a season 2. I think of all of the Star Wars things that we've seen, I think we're guaranteed to see a Mandalorian season 3 somewhere along the way, probably after the Mando movie that we get. I know that we've got an Ahsoka season 2 coming on the way. Out of all the other ones, I think Skeleton Crew might be my top pick to get another season. I think just cast my mind through everything. Yeah, I think it would be. I think it would be at the top of the list. I wouldn't mind a Book of Boba Fett season 2 if it was maybe a bit better written, but we'll see on that one.
We will indeed. We will indeed. I've got a really cool news story to go for with you. Now, I know I haven't mentioned this to you yet, Chris, but as wrestling fans, we do love a good lawsuit. Even though some people in the wrestling industry are not enjoying lawsuits right now. Here is a lawsuit I'm going to tell you about. So, Q Stark and Anthony Forrest are suing Lucasfilm for $190 million. So, just to give you a heads up, so essentially, Q Stark played Camie Marstrap in the original Star Wars film alongside Anthony Forrest, who played Leia's fixer, Lonzona. And he also played a Stormtrooper. So these were sort of Luke's childhood friends who were also in the scenes that were filmed for the Tashi station and things like that.
Oh, right. Yes, yeah. So, yeah, that... and didn't they reappear in was it Mando season 3?
So I think it was in the Book of Boba Fett. I don't know if they were actually there or not, but the Tashi station is shown.
Yeah, I think they're in it, but I don't know if it's the actors or not. Sorry, yes, you're right. It is Book of Boba Fett. And by the way, before when I said we'll see Mando season 3, I meant season 4, obviously.
Yep. So Q Stark is also the former girlfriend of Prince Andrew. Boo.
Oh God.
But that's just a little side fact. So yeah, so they're suing Lucasfilm for 190 million for profiteering off their likenesses. The scenes were cut from the theatrical release, later to appear in 1988 Star Wars Behind the Magic Interactive CD-ROM. Both characters appeared in the Book of Boba Fett in 2021, with the roles recast and were played by Mandy Kowalski and Skylar Bible. So I'm going to take you through the press release. So the 68-year-old actress who dated Prince Andrew in the early 1980s before his marriage to Sarah, Duchess of York, and also before he did anything naughty, starred as Camie Morstap in George Lucas' 1977 film Star Wars A New Hope, but her scenes were cut from the final edit. The scenes in question have resurfaced online in recent times, and the character has appeared in various spin-offs over the years, with litigation filed in an LA courtroom claiming the production company has profited off Stark's likeness. The characters did appear in the novelization of The Last Jedi, I believe. I think it sort of tells a story of, like, I think Luke's having a dream as if he never went to Obi-Wan, he'd married her and essentially lived his uncle's life. But again, this is the character, not the actress, because that was fiction written down. The legal action was brought by actor Anthony Forrest, who starred as the deleted character Fixer in scenes that were eventually cut. It's claimed both Stark and Forrest's intellectual property rights were exploited when the scenes became available online and on DVD. Forrest, who also played a role as a sandtrooper in the film, uttered the line, "These aren't the droids we're looking for." However, he allegedly received no compensation for his work. Forrest, 73, went on to appear in 1977 James Bond film, The Spy Who Loved Me, so he did a bit more. This is a strange one, isn't it? Because I think there's a lot going on with AI and sort of bringing actors back from the dead and who gets paid for what. I'm a big adversary of, you need to be paid, is my thoughts on it, but obviously you don't know what was in these guys' contract at the time. I think if they were paid for their, obviously, actual time on set and the work they did, and then if they've been using a CD-ROM, they probably should receive some rights, some money for that. I don't know, and I'm not saying they haven't. They seem to be saying they haven't. I find it weird how a big company wouldn't pay them. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I think this is... I mean, obviously anything I'm saying here, I have not got all the facts, and it's always a treacherous place to be speaking from where you haven't got all the facts, so I'll hold my hand up and say that. But my question is, why are you doing this now? What's triggered this for you both to do this now? I mean, surely it's not like Star Wars just got big. It's been around for a long time, and you would have thought that if there was any time for it, it probably would have been in the 90s. Or maybe even around Return of the Jedi. But anyway, that's one question I have. Why now? The next is, I do believe that they should probably have been compensated for their appearances in deleted scenes. But again, like you said, we don't know what their contracts were. I'm sure they were paid for their time on set. And maybe that's the kind of crux of the issue. I'm not a legal expert, but maybe, well, you were paid for it, but we didn't use your scenes, so you don't get paid residuals, you don't get paid, merchandise, you don't get paid anything else that one might get paid because you weren't in the movie. Later on, you got added in with some, additional scenes. Well, in fact, they were never added in. There were only extra scenes that you could view, and I think if you were one of them, you would probably be quite bitter that you got cut out of the biggest franchise and the biggest movie that ever existed. But I mean, I don't know where they're pulling this figure from. Like, it's everybody wants their piece of a pie, and I think Lucasfilm has probably been sued more times than they've had movie releases in certainty. But I think that they should definitely get paid. Anybody who appears, I mean, I think the nice thing to do would have been for the Book of Boba Fett to have given them a bit of a kickback. It's just, hey, thank you. We know you missed out on things, so look, here you go. Here's a thank you. A little payoff of something. But in terms of your characters and so on appearing in books, I mean, you have to ask, I mean, I have no idea how it works. Is it that, Harrison Ford, Mark Hamill, do they get paid every time that their character says a line in a book? I mean, obviously, if their likeness is used on the front cover, I'm sure they get paid for that. But, does Anthony Daniels get paid every time that C-3PO says something in a comic? I don't know. But on the flip side, you've got to think about smaller characters who appear and get expanded on, and that's the whole idea of the expanded universe, right? That these smaller side characters get screen time or book time that they wouldn't normally have. So, I mean, it's kind of a weird position, because if let's say that they had a book written about them, right? Both of their characters, and they became immensely popular, and suddenly they were at every single Comic-Con, they wouldn't be complaining. But they're trying to get money. It sounds to me, in my amateur opinion, like they're trying to get money just because they feel like they're owed it, as opposed to, really getting anything. But it all hinges on how much they've been paid in the past.
Definitely. I think for me, you've been paid for your role in the movie, whether your scenes were there or not, were cut or not. For me, I think if they've appeared on that DVD-ROM in 1998, and that's the first time Behind the Magic interactive CD-ROM, then yeah, they probably need paid for that. And maybe they have been, we don't know that. If they've ever had, and I don't know if they have, but if there's been action figures depicting them from their likeness and from those scenes in that movie, then I would like to think that, Hasbro or Kenner would not make action figures without a deal being in place. And I imagine they would have a deal in place and would be paying them for it. Now, I don't know if those figures exist. I don't know if there is any. I don't want any and all that. So it's a strange one, but I would like to think that they would be getting paid if their images are being used. Now, if the images aren't being used, like I said, if Camie appears in a book and it's just like appears in the book, then like no, because you didn't create Camie. Like, George Lucas wrote that down in the script. So we'll see. I imagine this will end up going nowhere, but it will be very interesting to see what it does.
It's a dangerous game to play because, Lucasfilm, you've got a relationship with them, right? And you never know when you might be needed for a DVD that you'll get paid for. Well, not a DVD now, but, a streaming documentary that you'll get paid for. You never know when you're going to need to be a talking head on something. And if you alienate yourself, then, you've got a really, really difficult time ahead of you. Really, you're kind of taking money off your own table, in my opinion. So you've got to be really, really strategic. I mean, sorry to bring this back to wrestling again, but there was a whole bunch of wrestlers a few years ago that sued the WWE, and there was a big class action lawsuit. And one of those people was Raven. Never turned up again in WWE after that. And if they'd won that lawsuit, he would have been laughing all the way to the bank, but he didn't. And as a result, he's never going to be in the Hall of Fame. He has, I think he's popped up in a couple of minor things. There was a table for three that he was on, stuff like that. But that was more like Mick Foley pushing for him, I think. He's never going to be invited on a Raw. So you've got to think am I playing the long game here or what? But then, they're both in their 60s now, these guys and girls. So maybe they're thinking, well, I want to get my bit before, my time comes.
Quite possibly. And I think that'll develop more as it sort of goes towards court dates and things like that. Obviously, you mentioned the Mandalorian film, Chris. The Mandalorian Grogu is obviously coming in summer of 2026. Did you know that Sigourney Weaver is going to be in that movie?
Oh, I didn't. No. That'll be interesting, bringing the star of Alien into the Star Wars franchise.
Well, that's what I think. I think Star Wars famous obviously for its strong portrayal of women characters. When you think about it all began with Carrie Fisher as Princess Leia in A New Hope. Sigourney Weaver, A, great actress, B, has portrayed very strong people in the past. And she's been speaking about that, so she says that she gets to have scenes with little Grogu, which is probably why she did the movie. She laughed. She said he's a little badass too. it's going to be wonderful for people to see what Grogu's up to now, because he's grown up a little bit and is capable of much more than maybe we think just watching the series. She's also said that she's essentially doing a character who has a position of authority. So I don't know what your thoughts are on sort of those comments that she's made.
I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, Sigourney Weaver is a fantastic actress. It's not just alien anything. She's had great roles over the years. I think she'll fit into the franchise really well. And if you think about it, unfortunately, we won't be getting Carl Weathers. So I suppose she might be some sort of a kind of replacement for him. Obviously not literally, but sort of, taking his sort of a role on. Or she might not be, but I'm just speculating that she might be. And, okay, well, we had one big Hollywood heavy hitter. Why don't we get another one in? Because that was working so well the last time. So, yeah, I'll welcome her into the franchise. It'll be great.
It will be. She goes on to further say, so she plays a wonderful character who is, in a position of authority, and I have to send the Mandalorian out on a mission on the Outer Rim where all the bad stuff happens. So I wonder if she's connected to the New Republic here.
Sounds like it. Sounds like, so yeah, I think probably.
I can't believe we've got to wait till summer 2026 for this movie, because it's already wrapped shooting. We know that, and we're probably going to start seeing bits of it soon, hopefully. Fingers crossed, quite possibly Star Wars Celebration Japan, which is in April, is where we'll probably start to see our first glimpses of things. Obviously, it is the Super Bowl weekend. As much as it is Star Wars Podcast Day, it's also Super Bowl weekend, where we do get lots of awesome movie trailers and TV spots. I don't think anything Star Wars is planned, or we would have heard about it by now. Probably the most recent one that was released in Super Bowl week was the Solo trailer, where the Star Destroyer was in the lightning storm, because I remember waking up watching it and going crazy. So we'll have to wait a bit to see scenes from the Mandalorian and Grogu. Yeah. I think there has been some bootleg versions about, because I think they have showed something like higher ups and like maybe some fan groups, but I haven't seen them myself.
No. I think I don't want to wait that long, but at the same time, maybe it might be good as a bit of palate cleanser. It's crazy to say this, but we've had a lot of Star Wars over the last few years. Good, bad, and everything in between. So maybe it'll be good to have a little bit of a break and then, come back with something strong. The Mandalorian is kind of their premiere series now, so it makes sense for them to do it as a movie. I know Bob Iger wants to start making money from the franchise again, so it makes sense. But I think I've said this before on the podcast, that the one thing that I will not like is that I'll have to go and see it, but I like to watch it with my wife, and my wife's not a native English speaker, and the best thing about Disney Plus for me is that I can just put Japanese subtitles on and we can both enjoy it first time round, but you can't do that in a movie theatre, unfortunately.
No, you can't. That is a big thing. I think we've discussed it a few weeks ago on the show. I see he's in the Royal We. It looks like we're going to have less, and it's the same with Marvel, I suppose. There's going to be some shows coming to streaming, but the majority of things are going to go back into theatres, which I think, to be fair, the Walt Disney Company probably needs to do. So I think it's good strategic planning by Bob Iger and the team. I think with Star Wars, what we're going to see is, I think Star Wars animation is going to be your main Disney Plus driver, with maybe one or two series, like live action series a year at the most, which is still good, but it means we won't be feasting like we have feasted in the past 2 years, so it's going to feel a bit strange on that front. But if we're getting one season animation and one live action season a year, it's still better than the dark times when there was no Star Wars, I suppose. But
exactly.
But I think that is the way it's going. I think Ahsoka will be on streaming. Will Mando come back to streaming? I don't know. Obviously, then I haven't really heard any other shows in development. It's mainly movies that they're talking about, which is very interesting. I don't know if we talked about this a few weeks ago. So there's like a new writer attached now for the Rey film.
Okay.
Which is like being announced, but it's like the third round now. And like obviously that movie's not going before cameras anytime soon, because they're still kind of iron out the script. Obviously, someone who's has an interest in the film, has worked in the industry. To me, it's not alarm bells, but it's a bit like, until that script's ironed out, then this movie's not happening. And
Yeah.
You know, I think Mandalorian Grogu is the first movie coming to theaters, which probably wasn't the plan originally when they announced all these titles. And I think, I don't know if you heard, but there's a Sean Levy Star Wars script that's like coming together very quick. Obviously, Sean Levy, who just recently directed Wolverine and Deadpool, possibly starring Ryan Gosling, who is available. And this movie could be going to the front of the queue to get done next. So I don't know what your thoughts are on sort of a project on its third writing team. You know, if you think about Marvel and Blade, like, is that ever going to happen? We don't know. I feel that it could be heading that way a bit. And obviously, what's your thoughts on the opposite of that? Way out of the blue, we hear that there's a Sean Levy project that hasn't been mentioned before. Is like the script's great and Ryan Gosling's available, and that could be happening like within the next few months.
I mean, I'm fine with that. I mean, for me, if there's a great idea, there's a good director, and we've got an A-list star attached to it, then it makes complete sense. Put that at the front of the queue and put your resources towards that, because you don't know if that's going to be there tomorrow. So you don't want to push that back down the queue. But to your point about, you know, movies that are on their second or third, fourth script writers, no, man, it's a death knell. I hate when they say such and such was brought in to, you know, triage the script or something, or, you know, to repair the script. And you're like, oh no. So basically you had a finished script that then, for whatever reason, people disagreed on and is now no longer the finished script. You had to bring somebody in with not enough time to try and fix it. And the only time I can say that I think that sounds like it worked for me, because I, against all odds, enjoyed it, was the Solo movie. There were point parts of it I can criticize, but on the whole, I've watched it. I've watched it more than once, and I've enjoyed it more than once. And I know originally they had the guys who were doing the Lego movie in to direct it, and then they left partway through, and then they got Ron Howard in. But then again, that's the keystone of that, isn't it? Ron Howard. You know, you're bringing in Ron Howard as Steven Spielberg.
That was the opposite as well, because that was like, so obviously, like, Lawrence Kasdan wrote the script.
Yes.
With John Kasdan, I believe. So, and then one of the issues was, I believe, is that the dailies were coming out of Lucasfilm. And obviously, the Phil Lord and Chris Miller were doing like one in the can of the script, for example, and then just going like ad hoc on the rest, ad lib.
Mm-hmm.
Sending it in, and they weren't happy. Where I think before they got fired off the project, like, they flew Lawrence Kasdan into London where they were shooting to like make sure that they're doing the script. Like, the script is what, like, all movies are based off whatever they're written, right, or should be. You know, this isn't a comedy. You can have comedy aspects, but it's not a comedy where we're going to ad lib it. It's not an episode of Saturday Night Live, right? And even that's scripted to a certain extent. And then obviously they still weren't playing ball, and then that's why there was obviously, you know, the stop production. There was talks. Them two were paid off quite a considerable amount of money, I believe, to sort of go away. And then obviously the project restarted with Ron Howard in command. So again, Ron Howard going back, like, here's a Lawrence Kasdan script that we want to make. Do that, please. So it wasn't too much of a rehash, I suppose. We're just getting back on track to the script. I think one thing I am pleased about is that they haven't sort of rushed this into production. You know, okay, right, some writers have had a go at it. We don't like it. Okay, right, we'll let you guys leave. We'll bring someone else in. And I don't think it will go before cameras if it's not right, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And at least it's not. At least we're not hiring somebody on the set, for example, to do rewrites while we're trying to shoot a movie, which has happened in Hollywood a lot, you would think. But at least we're not doing that with Star Wars, which is good.
Yeah, and I think that there's been a lot of lessons learned over the last few years since the buyout by Disney. So, you know, good on them. You know, don't put things out there. Don't rush things out there. Take your time. At the end of the day, you know, we might say, "Oh, I can't believe we've got to wait until 2026 for something." But what would I rather have? Something great that comes out 2026, or something mediocre that comes out tomorrow?
Indeed. I've got one last Star Wars topic I want to talk about, Chris, if that's all right.
Okie dokie. Yeah, of course.
So we know about, obviously, Star Wars being in Disney parks. It has been in Disney parks for a long time before the merger. But obviously we do have the Galaxy's Edge theme parks, which happened after the merger, which are at Disneyland Park in California and also in Hollywood Studios in Walt Disney World in Florida. you obviously have characters wandering around these lands. Obviously, the land is Batu, which is a canon planet, which is where you go. It's what the theme park's based on. And there's going to be 2 new characters coming to Batu. You will soon be able to encounter Jedi Master Luke Skywalker and R2-D2. They are coming to the Disneyland Park in California. And I believe that they are due, or were due more information on February 10th. And they're expected to make their appearance during the limited season of the Force from March 28th to May the 11th, 2025. Now, I wonder what your thoughts are on this. So, for example, I've just been to Disneyland Paris over New Year's Eve there. I got to meet the Mandalorian, got to meet Darth Vader, which was fantastic. Obviously, 2 costumes in armor and masks, so potentially anybody could be in them. You can put voice changes on them, and as long as they meet the correct stature and can do the characteristics, they're probably fine. What's your thoughts on sort of, again, like Mark Hamill's not going to be here. Also, Mark Hamill's not 40 anymore, so who knows how this Luke Skywalker's going to look. But you're going to be interacting with him like he is Luke Skywalker. Sort of, what's your thoughts and what the challenges that come with? It's easier to hire a tall man to be Chewbacca, for example, to walk around the theme park than to have someone be Luke Skywalker. But I mean, they do it with Rey.
I was just going to say that I haven't been myself, although I am going to Paris this year, so I think I'm going to sneak into, or not literally, don't come at me, Disney. I think I'm going to try and sneak us a day to go to Disneyland Paris. But I've seen a few videos, and Ray's around and stuff, so it's fine. It's not a problem as long as they can do a relatively convincing accent and it'll look roughly like them. It's fine, but like you say, it is a lot easier to have somebody in a mask with a voice changer on. That's why it works so well having it the way that they did it. There's a reason why it's an Imperial occupied base and not a Republic occupied base, because you can see the Republic, New Republic officers' faces, and you can't from Stormtroopers.
Indeed, obviously Kylo Ren's there, but again in his mask, where he's covered up. So yeah, there was a cool clip on socials of like R2 and R2 and Luke sort of rolling up to the Falcon that they've got there, and it looked really cool. But again, it was all shot from behind. You didn't really see this Luke Skywalker's face. But very interested to see how it works. But again, it sees them going away from the canon. Originally, Batu was meant to be in canon, set in the same timeline, so this would technically be Luke from The Last Jedi. After The Last Jedi, obviously Luke who passed away along with the Force. But this is obviously
that's my favorite brand of Luke is Return of the Jedi Luke.
Yeah, so this is sort of that Luke who turned up in The Mandalorian essentially is who we're getting here, which is pretty cool. Is anything Star Wars you want to talk about, Chris, that we haven't talked about?
No, I think we've covered all of the major things. I need the thing that I did hear a rumor, and please tell me you're the man to tell me if it's true or not, but that they'd recast Baylan Skoll in Ahsoka season 2, which obviously, because unfortunately, the actor passed away. But I'd heard that it was going to be the guy who played the Hound in Game of Thrones. Have you heard that?
Yeah, so that's being reported by sort of Hollywood mainstream now. So it hasn't been confirmed, but it's not been denied, and it's been allowed to run in sort of the main publications. So I would say that is probably true. We've run the story and talked about it. We've talked on the episode, so yeah, we're taking that as that is probably going to happen. Yeah, it's probably signed, sealed, delivered.
That's cool. I mean, unfortunately, the worst thing is that somebody who had a family died. That's the kind of where that line stops. But when it comes to Star Wars, I think the best thing that they could do is replace him with an actor who's could do a good job, and I certainly think that the Hound's actor could. And yeah, I'm all for that. Just grow a big beard.
Definitely, I think obviously it's very sad what happened to Ray Stevenson. He did a fantastic job as Baylan Skoll, but Baylan Skoll, the character, is going to be such a driving force for the Ahsoka season 2, and the power that he is trying to access on Peridea is huge, and it's going to be a big part of our Star Wars storytelling, I believe. There's talks of Ahsoka season 2 where Hayden Christensen's coming back. Not only is the Force Ghost in the moment, because he's there in that time frame now as the Force Ghost, watching over Ahsoka, making sure that she's going to achieve what she needs to stop this power becoming unleashed, but also more flashbacks to Clone Wars era. Rumours are unconfirmed that Hugh McGregor's coming back again, to sort of play Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Clone Wars flashbacks, as well as maybe a Force Ghost to maybe help Ahsoka go through what she's going through to stop this man unleashing the power of the father, the daughter, and the son from that Clone Wars arc. So I think it's a good thing that, the stories do need to continue and they do need to live on, and there's a lot of stories still to be told here. And if Ray hadn't done such a good job, we probably wouldn't care. But because Ray did do such a good job, we've all bought into what Bane and Scar's doing, and we care about it. Obviously, sadly, he's no longer here to continue that. And, we're gonna get somebody else coming who's probably gonna play it a bit differently, because as they should, it'll be their interpretation of it, and they can build on the legacy that Ray started to build with this character. And I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to Ahsoka season 2. I can't come quick enough for my liking.
I mean, I wouldn't want to put a time frame on it, but I imagine we're probably looking at 2027 maybe. Before we get eyes on it.
But like I said before, take your time. Make them good.
So I just think, obviously they've wrapped Mandalorian Grogu, which was directed by Dave Filoni. Obviously, he's the one who'll be directing Ahsoka as well. So time will tell on that, but I just think by the time you start seeing the press run and they start building up the Mandalorian and Grogu, which will be the first Star Wars movie in theaters for, at that point, it'll be 7 years, I think, because Rise of Skywalker was in 2019. This will be in 2026. So yeah, like almost be 6.5 years since the Star Wars film was in theaters, I think, would be the maths. So I imagine they'll be doing quite a lot of press for it in building it. So I can't see Dave being freed up to then start fully producing Ahsoka season 2. And I think it'll be ready for 2027, I imagine. But that's just my gut feeling. That I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
That brings us into our Star Wars talk. I've got a different type of question for you, Chris.
Okay,
so here's what I'm going to say, right? If I was going to go down to the woods and have a wander around...
I thought you were going to say today.
No, if I was going to go down to the woods and have a wander around, maybe have a podcast in my ears, what sort of things would I find lurking in the woods, especially around the flat woods?
Nice little segue there. So, if you're around the flatwoods, you may find an alien or possibly interdimensional being that appears in a ball of fire and kind of slowly menaces its way towards you, but doesn't really do anything to you. It just seems a little bit of a sort of menace. You are, of course, referring to the latest episode of my podcast, which is Dystopian Simulation Radio, which is sort of like the X-Files, but in podcast form. It's making conspiracies fun again. We are investigating all the aliens, all the cryptids that are out there, and we're trying to get to the bottom. Essentially, the crux of our podcast is that we really want to believe, but none of this evidence is really making us believe. So myself and my friend Lindsay, we do a deep dive into a different cryptid or case or subject, such as aliens, Men in Black, each week. So if that sounds like the type of thing that you like, and you've liked my appearance on this show, please head over in your Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anywhere else and just pop in Dystopian Simulation Radio. There's not many podcasts let's start off with Dystopian, so we'll pop up pretty quickly. We'd love to have you there. You can find us on social media at DS Radio, and we would love it if you came and join our admittedly rather bizarre little podcast.
Definitely check out Chris's awesome podcast. Like he said, it's very similar to Feel to the X-Files and watching that. It's quite a lot of fun facts, shall we say? Snippets of information, obviously trying to figure out if things are real or not. I think it's really cool, and you can sort of make your mind up as well, I suppose, of the things that are presented, as well as going along with what Chris and Lindsay are saying. But it's definitely fun. It's definitely weird at times and very interesting. And I think in today's world, where everything's doom and gloom, you definitely need a little bit of that interest and weirdness to sort of take your mind off all the horrible things going on around us.
Yeah.
Chris, thank you very much for joining me on today's episode of Star Wars. Where can the people find you on social media?
So the best way is to find me, I say, at d.s.radio, or if you do fancy following myself, you can follow me at Quantum of Santos.
Quantum of Santos, obviously, because your favourite James Bond film is Quantum of Solace, is that correct?
It is from that. That is definitely not my favourite James Bond film, but it was around at the time that I created my first Twitter handle.
What would be your favourite Bond film before we go home here?
It's going to be a close tie between The Living Daylights, GoldenEye. I think it's between those two. Classic Bond-wise, it's I think Goldfinger, it's Goldfinger. Yeah, that's a pretty standard answer. But GoldenEye, that was my first Bond film that I saw. Really, it was I love it. And View to a Kill. Sorry, not View to a Kill. The other Timothy Dalton one. You Only Live Twice. Damn it! I'm getting myself all confused here. What am I doing? I wasn't prepared to be talking about Bond, Peter. Look what you've done to me.
Stop getting Bond wrong.
Stop getting Bond wrong. Sorry, let me just put down my my sunny delight that I'm drinking here, just in case I spill it everywhere. The Living Daylights is fantastic, but also License to Kill. No, man, God, they're all good. You know what? I'm going to say GoldenEye, but the two Dalton ones are a very close second, because Dalton is the closest depiction of Bond to the book Bond, which I think was often overlooked by people.
Okay, and I've got another question I'm going to ask you. So, obviously, we are celebrating Star Wars Podcast Day 2025. Obviously, the first ever Star Wars podcast was Jedi Talk in 1999. Now, if I was asking this question in the 90s, I would probably ask you, who's your favourite Bond girl? But it's not. It's 2025. So, what's your favourite Bond theme song?
Oh, nobody does it better. Yeah, probably nobody does it better, but I do. The GoldenEye is amazing. Tina Turner, and also, did you know that was written by Bono and The Edge from U2?
Wow, the Edge and not Cope.
No, not Cope. Not Cope.
Shouldn't have. Oh. Yes, we'll talk about that there. Off air. I've got a soft spot for Duran Duran's song they did.
Meeting you with a view to a kill.
Yeah, it's a song of the times, and I think it's a great time.
Yeah, you know what? Almost all Bond songs are good. There's more ones that underwhelm than disappoint. They're not. There's no really bad ones. It's just like it's hard to hit some of the highs of like Goldfinger again. They don't really make them like Shirley Bassey or Tom Jones now.
They certainly don't. Well, Chris, thank you very much. Obviously, with a bit of a James Bond segue there. We'll have a glass of Sunny Delight together to celebrate Bond later.
Next Bank Holiday Monday.
Yes, indeed. Listeners, thank you very much for listening. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, please leave us a 5-star review. A lovely little sentence. Keeps us smiling all day. Only takes you a few moments. And if you are listening on any of the other wonderful podcast applications out there, there are a few now. Again, just leave us a lovely review. Keeps us smiling all day. Only takes you a few moments. And if you want to share those reviews on social media when you've done them, tag us in them. And we might just send you some little goodies in the post. On social media, you can find myself on Twitter, now known as X, and on Instagram at Geordie Jedi Pete. You can find the podcast on X at BorsStar. You can also find the podcast everywhere else, including YouTube, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, you name it. We've probably got it at Star Wars Podcast. Thank you very much for listening. May the Force be with you all. And remember, always tell that to Kanja Club.